Hi, this is Esan. Here in this segment, we are going to talk about the second component of memory structure, which is long term memory. Long term memory, intuitively, is a more permanent storage repository of information. In terms of duration, it's generally accepted that the information resides in a relative permanent state, and the forgotten information sometimes just means that the person is having some sort of difficulty in retrieving it. So the capacity is considered to be unlimited. And interesting enough, this is what we typically think of when we use the word memory. According to Dr. Tulving, there are at least three distinct systems which comprises long-term memory. The first is procedural memory. This is the most this has the most direct relation to our subject, Kines 385, because it has high relation specifically to storing and retrieving information about motor skills. It helps us to do things instantaneously without even thinking, so we know how to do, but if being asked to explain the movement verbally, you cannot explain it properly. An example: think about a way to verbally explain to me how I can learn to ride a bicycle. Difficult, right? This idea is also known as implicit memory. The second one is episodic memory. It is related to our knowledge about personally experienced events along with their temporal association. By temporal association, I mean time association. Example is, do you remember the first time you drove a car? Here, you are very likely to recall this event in terms of both time and space. However, according to Dr. Tulving, this memory is more vulnerable to neural dysfunction. And so this memory is very important because sometimes it can also be used to check if the movement that you are doing at the present is right or wrong. So in order to make this decision whether it's right or wrong, we need a reference system. And the reference system can be retrieved from your past experience. Yes. So moving on to the last stage, which is the semantic memory. It holds our general knowledge about the world, and this has been developed from many experiences. For example, what is the capital of United States? These last two systems for long-term memory can be grouped in terms of explicit memory or declarative knowledge or declarative memory, as we are able to describe the memory if being asked. So we can break down long-term memory in the following way. Now that we have an understanding that understanding about all these definitions, we can understand that declarative knowledge is predominating in early skill learning. However, as our skill develops, we move more towards to the procedural memory system. Now that we have an idea about various memory components and their functions, let us now try to understand why we forget things. One explanation is trace decay, which is similar to the idea of memory duration as explained in the previous short-term memory lecture while explaining duration of memory. Just to recap, our memory deteriorates with time. The other two reasons are related to interference. One is proactive interference, the other being retroactive interference. Proactive interference is where the interference is presented prior to the presentation of information which is to be recalled or remembered. Whereas in retroactive interference, the interference is presented after. Now, I'm going to quickly describe the idea with a very recent research study. In this study, the participants were asked to memorize some words followed by some motor skills. Remember this pattern. Later, they were asked to recall the things. However, transcranial magnetic stimulation was used to zap some part of their brain. One was the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is related to all the decision making that you make. And the other one is the M1, which is the motor cortex. So if you look at this pattern of verbal skill followed by motor skill followed by the zapping or the interference, you can understand this is a retroactive interference. And here in this graph, you can see that when the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is zapped, the errors in the verbal case and the motor case are less as compared to the sham case. Sham means the control group where the transmagnetic stimulation instrument was held above their head to give a placebo effect, but it was never turned on. So the sham group can be considered as our average daily life case. Now, if you look at the right graph, you see that the red line shows very little correlation between motor and verbal recall when the zapping was done in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. However, both the graph for motor zapping of the motor cortex shows significant correlation when the zapping was done in the motor cortex. Later, a similar experiment was designed, but this time the motor skill was followed by the verbal skill, which was later followed by the TMS based zapping. And you can see that here the results are completely different when we compare it with the previous case. See, here they have a different correlation with this. I mean, they're different, they're significantly different. This example of research study gives an idea about how non-invasive research is done to explain our movements. Finally, we all know that this is a different study. Here we are going to test whether our idea about variable practice is right or it's flawed. We all know that variable practice is better for motor learning skills. So a research study was designed in a very similar fashion to the ones showed earlier to see if the idea of variable practice and its relation to motor skill learning holds when different parts of the brain are zapped retroactively. And the results show that yes, variable practice is still the best when it comes to motor memory consolidation. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you guys in discussion sections. I hope you have a lot of questions. Take care. Good night.